G'day, g'day, wherever you may be in the land of the internet. Welcome to Mastering Music, Mastering Life. I'm your host, Tony Jack the Bear Mance, and we've been off for a little while, but it's good to be back, giving the podcast another kickstart. And I'm so happy to have my guest tonight, a young lady who is a musician. She's a bass player. I hope you are a bass player, right?
I used to be, not so much anymore.
Used to be a bass player. Works, and works as a social media strategist and a mentor, and she works closely with a lot of bands. And her name is Monica Strut. And Monica, so good to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Tony. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Up until last week, I didn't know of your existence. And so forgive my ignorance there, but it was fortuitous that I came across a blog that you wrote, which was, kind of went pretty viral. Got a lot of traction. I certainly shared the shit out of it, and it was a blog that was basically pertaining as to how people should post. But more importantly, what I really liked about it was how it appealed to this notion that people hold themselves back because they worry about maybe how they look in front of people, or that they're going to potentially spam people, and so there's this mental barrier. Well, we better not do this, we better not do that, and that really appealed to me. And as someone that does a lot of mentoring myself, that was like, wow, I really got to talk to this girl, because I really like what she wrote, and we've had a conversation since. So yeah, and it's good to have some girl power on the show too. So yeah, so this is why you're here, and thank you again for being here.
Oh, awesome. That's so awesome. No, yeah, mindset is absolutely one of my biggest passions, I would say. And for those who don't know, I coach or consult with bands on their social media strategy and their general business strategy, but I end up a lot of the time consulting on mindset, because it is just such a important thing when it comes to, especially, being an entrepreneur, which you essentially are as a musician. So yeah, really, really cool that you resonated with that blog post. I think, I don't know, it was definitely one that I wrote from the heart. And I find that those blog posts, whether you intend to or not, kind of resonate with a lot of people rather than the more strategy-based stuff. So yeah, really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's so true. I think when you do communicate from that place of authenticity, and it's not strategized, it's not thought out, it can come across as contrived sometimes, even though the information may be really good and detailed and useful. I think people just kind of automatically resonate to those things, and they feel that stuff when they read it, or they see a video, or hear you speak. I think that's very, very true. So Monica, tell us how did you get into music, and more importantly, what I'm really interested in, how is it that you came to into this role, and what inspired you to get started on that? Because I think there are a lot of people out there that do mentor and do stuff on ground level, but not a hell of a lot of people, at least online. So what got you there, and what's inspired you to do this?
Yeah, sure. So I've pretty much been a musician my entire life, and after high school I went to
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, there was just a loud noise outside.
That's all right. All good.
So after high school, I went to music college, and I did a bachelor's degree in music. And I remember sitting down on one of the very, very first days, and one of the mentors and lecturers that was sort of speaking to us for the day, he said to us that essentially 2 out of the 100 people in the room were going to be continuing to do music in the next 5 years. I can't remember the exact time frame that he said, but he just kind of looked around to the room. He said, the hard truth is only 2% of this room are going to be pursuing music in a certain amount of time. And of course, young me, I was sitting there and I was like, well, that's obviously going to be me. But as the years have gone by, I certainly have seen that statistic come true. And I've seen a lot of my friends who are very, very talented. It's not that they're lacking in talent, kind of drop off the radar in terms of their music career. And even after I finished uni and just being a part of the local music scene up in Sydney, where I'm originally from, seeing musicians come and go and just being really, really frustrated because they didn't necessarily have the tools or the confidence, as it turns out, to promote themselves properly. And to me, that's really, really sad because, first of all, I kind of feel like, it's a bit of a lonely journey sometimes. And I'm not saying, I'm look at me, I'm, still keeping on going. But, I feel like I am. And although I can meet new friends and new people, it really, really upsets me that I've seen so many of my peers kind of give up on their dreams when at one time I know how passionate they were. I mean, these music degrees, they're not cheap. They cost about $40,000 to do. So you would think that the people doing these types of courses would be serious about it. And I'm sure they were at the time. But for one thing, I really enjoyed my time at the college that I went to, but they certainly didn't teach a whole lot to do with marketing. And essentially, when you are a musician or you're, in the music industry or any sort of creative industry where it sort of centers around, you as the artist, marketing is, it's probably just as important as talent in some ways. So that's kind of why I got into consulting, because in my daytime career, I became a digital marketer, and I just wanted to figure out a way to help bands to upskill and also to kind of give that extra support because I feel like that's, something that's lacking in the music industry.
So tell me, with all the bands you've worked with, where do you think are the most common pitfalls, or where are the biggest problems you think that bands, or the biggest mistakes that you see more often than not with bands and their marketing? Where do you think they need? Where do you feel they need the most help in your experience?
To be honest, it just goes back to basics of having strategy. I mean, some bands, aren't aware, or some musicians aren't aware, and I certainly wasn't for a very long time, about the order in which you do things. So you do the writing, and then you do recording, and then you do the mixing, and then the mastering. But then where does PR come into it? A lot of bands, I also worked for Heavy Magazine for quite a number of years and managed their social media. And a number of bands would try and pitch a release to the magazine after the release had already been out for a number of weeks or even months. So it really comes down to basic in the sense that, learning how to pitch for PR and media attention before the release comes out, and just sort of the order in which you do things. Because I think once you sort of get your head around this one consistent order, which you can kind of rinse and repeat, whether it's a single or album or EP or whatever the case may be, once you know that process, then it's kind of a rinse and repeat sort of thing. And you feel a bit more, I don't know, I feel like a lot of bands are quite scattered in the direction, and they're not sure whether they need to do an album. A lot of people are kind of stuck in the past. That's probably definitely one of my most common things that I discuss with bands, is whether to do an album or whether to do an EP or a single. And it's my, I will always say you need to do what's right for your band first of all, but I know it's just, a lot of bands seem to be sort of thinking that an album is going to bring them a certain notoriety, but if you don't have the audience there in order to consume that amount of content, then it becomes quite difficult. So yeah, they're really the two main things I would say.
Yeah, I get asked a bit about just an EP or album, what should we do? And the same as I say to you, what do you want to release? Sometimes you want to release something that's meant to be consumed as an album and released as an album, but I think it gets asked a lot because you just see a lot of bands now who just drip feeding material out, and I feel doing it that way, you've got an excuse to then maybe do a launch and set up a gig and stretch your stuff out rather than just put it, because essentially, look, music's free, people aren't paying for it, and when you invest so much money, time and effort into creating these recordings, just to kind of just put it out there, and people with short attention spans and being spoilt, it's like, okay, well, there's something new, and of course you've done your wad there, haven't you, in that respect? So I think now in the current market, if I was an artist, I'll be putting it out slowly. So tell me, run us through the process of a band that'll come and sit down with you and talk with you. Typically, what would a band experience? What are the sort of things that you'd be able to help them with? What are the sort of things you offer? and where do you think what's been kind of the most popular thing that you've been able to provide for people, or the where you feel the most value is that you've been able to provide?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I suppose the majority of the bands that come to someone, a consultant, they have kind of been circling around the local scene for what can be years. Maybe it's a couple of years, maybe it's, up to 6 years or more. And they kind of feel like they're butting their heads up against a glass ceiling, so to speak, in terms of widening their fan base and getting noticed by the actual music industry, labels and booking agents and that sort of thing. And they kind of feel like they're not really sure what else they can do. A lot of the times they're, been playing in the local sort of areas. Maybe they've done a few tours around Australia, and yeah, they're just not really sure where to go from here. So that's usually the most common thing, and they look sort of outside themselves. And it really, I find it is helpful to have sort of that third party opinion in terms of, where are we right now as a band? Like, how does the scene sort of perceive the band? Like, help with branding, that sort of thing. So it's really about the next steps and figuring out the next steps, and also tweaking those elements that might be missing. So there may be kind of a very wishy-washy brand. There may be, music and videos released, but they're not quite of the quality that's expected of 2019. So just sort of tightening those screws a little bit before then starting to progress to the next level. So you've got a really solid foundation. And that's what I really enjoy helping with, is really tightening those screws and sort of tightening up that foundation.
Yeah. Tell me, is it typically, can you help bands in, I mean, I guess it's how long is a piece of string, but if a band comes to see you to be consulted on their marketing and mindset stuff, does it usually take a few consults before the penny starts to drop, or where they start to see some actual, benefit for the money they're spending? Or is it one of those things where they need to invest slightly in a more longer term in order for them to see some real benefit that's going to be lasting?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what their goals are. So I will typically, I've got a couple of different ways in which I work with bands. Some bands literally just require a one-off session just to get that clarity and just to get those action steps. And then usually it's those types of bands where all of the band members are really savvy already in the business side of things, and they all, manage their own social media, and they're really, really savvy in that department, and they just need someone else to come in and just sort of point them in the right direction and just give them a few more action steps. But then I have bands that kind of want to work more longer term to release like an EP or an album or a single, something like that. So maybe like 6 weeks, or I've got a 6-week package or a 3-month package, where we can really kind of, depending on their individual needs, because it's completely tailored, there's no one size fits all. But if they need work on the branding to really come out of the gate running with, this is who we are. One of my favorite things to do is to kind of do a relaunch of a band. So a band that has, been around for a little while and they're kind of been a bit quiet. And, it's kind of like relaunching as a new band with like a new look, a really, really polished sort of, branding and a new song, amazing new video, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it really just depends on the individual band. A lot of like people will come to me when, maybe there's just one driving person in the band and the other band members are sort of more like session musicians, or they're not really so engaged in the business side of things. So they really need someone else to come in and kind of help with the workload, because it is really, really hard when there's just one person kind of driving the business side of things. So yeah, it just comes down to what the needs are of the individual, I guess.
Yeah. So tell me, that article that you wrote, what drove you to write it? And if you remember off the top of your head, what were the main points that you were wanting to get across? Because I'm sure there are anyone that may be watching or listening now may be thinking that, shit, we want to put ourselves out there, but we're just worried that we may be oversaturating ourselves, or that some of our friends or peers might look at us and roll their eyes, and they kind of want to avoid that kind of contact with people. What drove it, and what were the main takeaway points?
Yeah, for sure. So I began to notice, because obviously as a social media manager and someone involved in the music scene, I am a bit geeky in the sense that I do pay attention to what bands are actually doing to promote their shows. And there has been quite a number of situations where bands have come to my local city, bands that I would have loved to see live, friends of mine from Sydney, or just a general band that that I really like their music. And I would actually miss the notification of the event, and there wasn't sufficient sort of promotion on on social media in order to let me know that they were actually coming. And I was like, oh damn, so I've definitely noticed a pattern with a lot of bands not sort of kind of being afraid to spam their audience. And it's kind of something that I've picked up on over the years, where musicians kind of feel like they almost feel guilty for wanting people to come to their shows. And I think that there is a real strange culture around live music, because we all know that, especially I know overseas is different, but in Australia, whilst Melbourne has a very good live music scene, it's certainly not the case in Sydney and in some of the other cities in Australia. So one of the tactics to get people to your shows is kind of almost to guilt trip people, support the scene. And I just think that that's such a kind of not the best way to go about it. And yeah, I think bands, it just comes from a sense of guilt, that shameless self-promotion. So I actually did a post in my Facebook group. I've got a Facebook group called Music Marketing and Mindset for heavy bands and musicians. And I did a post in there just asking people, do you ever feel like you're annoying or you're spamming people, or do you ever feel awkward about promoting your shows? And overwhelmingly, the result was yes. People really do feel like they're annoying, essentially their friends, people that are supposed to be supportive of them, their friends and family on Facebook. So judging by the response to that post, I thought about it a little bit more, and I kind of wanted to put together a blog post that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek that would give musicians the confidence in order to promote themselves. So the first reason why the whole concept is called How to Not Annoy People on Social Media When Promoting Your Band's Shit. And I guess that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, because the whole concept of the article is you are actually not annoying people on social media, because it's virtually impossible. And the main reason for that is due to the algorithms. Only 2 to 10% of your posts from your band's page are actually going to be seen by your audience and by your followers. That's, of course, unless you sponsor it. But generally, bands kind of reserve their budget in terms of sponsoring posts. So you can't spam people because not everyone's going to see the posts. And then I guess it's more of a confidence thing in terms of promoting on your personal Facebook pages. And the thing is, when people are scrolling through Facebook, they're not actually going to notice one post about your show. There's this marketing concept called the 7 touch points, where it takes 7 touches or 7 times for someone to come into contact with, a piece of information before they're going to be inspired or compelled to decide whether they want to take action. So you actually need to show people a certain amount of times in order for them to retain the information. Mm-hmm. And lastly, it's who cares? Who the fuck cares? I don't know if I can swear.
You can fucking swear all you want.
Oh, awesome. Who the fuck cares if you are spamming people? Number one, these are usually your friends and family or people within the music industry. So they're either going to be supportive of you, or they're just used to it because they're also in bands themselves and they understand. And if they do get annoyed, that's not your people. They are not your target audience anyway. They can unfriend you, and it's actually literally going to make 0 difference to your life, because the people that are interested want to see your posts. As I was saying myself, I wanted to see the posts from those bands that I missed out on their shows. And I just wish that they promoted it a bit more so I could actually absorb that information. So that was basically the crux of the article. And, I do get quite passionate about it, because a lot of bands feel frustrated that people aren't coming to their shows, and it's really, really hard in such a small music scene like we have in Australia. It is difficult to get people to your shows. So you need to go hard or go home, because at the end of the day, no one's going to promote you for you. So, yeah.
What do you think about this the whole culture of putting door lists and guest lists and stuff like that? Where do you stand with that, and how do you think well managed that generally is? Because I noticed that a lot of it almost seems an expectation now that if you remotely know someone in the band, there's the sense I get, there's almost this sense of entitlement to it, and so and it's almost like, well, we're doing you a favor by rocking up. Yeah, we're here to support you, but we're here to add to the numbers. What's your take on door lists, and how do you conduct your own, and how would you advise bands to take care of that side of things?
Yeah, you're right. There is somewhat of an expectation, I think, and probably always has been. I know the band. I think that door lists have their place, but put it this way, I made my own mother pay for my first gig in Sydney, and that was a festival show, and the ticket was not cheap. I made my mother pay because I think that you get one door spot per band member, whether you choose to use that on a significant other or more, what I think is more beneficial strategy-wise is to use that door spot for a videographer or a photographer if you can't get them sort of extra door spots. I think you really need to earn your stripes in terms of how many people you let on the door. Sure, if you're Metallica, have as many people on the door as you want, because you already know that room's going to be full. But, when a band gets to a certain point, I've been to shows where I've been on the door and there's been 100 other people on the door because, it's a huge venue and there's already 400 payers in there. So essentially like 50 or 100 people on the door, what it's going to do is it's going to pack out the room and make the show like really, really amazing. And it's also going to make sure the right people are seeing the show, the reviewers, the photographers, the people in the music industry, the bloggers, all that, they're fantastic people to put on the door. But when you're a grassroots local band who's been around only a couple of years and struggling to sell enough tickets to make the venue half full, then don't put anyone on the door. I made partners pay. Like, as I said, I made my mum pay. Like, if they want to support you, they can pay $10 to get in. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, 10 to $20 to see 2, 3 or 4 bands in some cases, some people may scoff at that, but then they'll pay $15 for a craft beer, no problem at all.
And it just perpetuates this idea that this poor musician mentality, whereas I think a lot of that's self-inflicted. If you need to value yourself enough that you need to charge appropriately on the door, and obviously not some outrageous rate, $15 is appropriate. But yeah, I think sometimes just letting everyone and their dog in for free to shows, which I've definitely seen, perpetuates that idea that at the end of the day, you're not going to earn any money. Now you're a starving musician, and then you start to lose momentum and passion for what you're doing, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. We really need to take responsibility for that mindset as well.
How do you do that? How does a band come to you where you can see, because most of the musicians and artists I work with have a very low self-worth, and that's reflected in how much they are prepared to charge to get a gig. And quite often it's the case of, well, if we don't do it, somebody else will. And but there certainly is and I'm being very broadly, it's a great big generalization, but my observation is just such a lack of self-worth. And I'm not judging on this because self-worth was a big part of my lack of self-worth and self-esteem. Consume me right up until late 40s. So the penny didn't drop for me till much later in life, and it's one of the reasons it's inspired me to do what I do. So how do you help an artist where you see that they have this low self-esteem, low self-worth? How do you help them, coach them through breaking through that, or helping them see that for themselves and start to whether it's reinvent themselves or just reorientate themselves to be able to negotiate better money, or just have better dealings and not get stepped on as much?
That is a really good question. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of the creator's curse, that a lot of musicians don't have necessarily the biggest sort of self-confidence. I guess, you know, a good place to start is just being really, really, actually, I would say probably the number one thing is knowing why. Why are you doing music? Is it to help people? Is it to promote some sort of global change? Is it to, you know, it's usually to help people. Usually anyone in any sort of career path, you know, no matter which way you kind of phrase it, they're usually in the industry that they're passionate about because they want to help people. So I think first of all, understanding that there's something bigger at stake other than yourselves is a really good motivator, because we can all get caught up in imposter syndrome and I'm not good enough. And, you know, the music industry, it's a hard industry. It's not for everyone. And we get that drilled into us as well, I think, from a young age. I don't know, like I grew up with reading like rock biographies of all these bands from the 80s, and they were all starving artists, and everyone, you know, says how hard the industry is, and it's true. But I think definitely the number one thing is knowing why you're doing it. Do you, you know, for example, just to use myself, I went through a really sort of rough period in my sort of childhood to teenage years for about 10 years. And music I really turned to, especially lyrics, to find something to kind of resonate and something that I could relate to and sympathize with what I was going through. And it saved my life. It saved a lot of people's lives that I've known. So in turn, I want to hopefully do that for somebody else. And now with the business, I want to like inspire people. And, you know, as much as, you know, we all have days where we think it's too hard, or 3 people rock up to the show, even though you feel like you've gone ham on the promo and whatnot, you know, that's always going to happen. Like, but the thing is, why are you, if you've got that sort of bigger picture in mind, you can kind of focus on that as opposed to all the little details along the way. So that's more of like a mindset shift. And I think that's really important. But strategy wise, I think it's also important to have a product that you really, really, really believe in. A song that you love and that all the band members in the band love, and a really good video to accompany that conveys what you were trying to convey in the song. Because that's another issue with bands writing albums too early, is they are kind of sometimes having a lot of filler songs that they don't 100% believe in. And even if that's going to show at the end of the day. So yeah, number one thing, know your why. And secondly, just have something that you are so proud of. And then who cares? Who cares how it's perceived as well? If you love it, then at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And usually if you love it so much, then other people are going to love it too.
I think good answer. I think one of the other things too that is really important that I bring up with a lot of the kids I mentor is asking them about who are your peer group, who are the people that you hang around with, because we're so much guided and supported or even brought down by the people that are around us. And I found, again, my own experiences when that concept was first brought to me, and I initially balked at it because I felt like, so this means I have to, get rid of friends I've known for a long period of time. And even though deep down I knew the relationship was toxic, but, and I think especially in Australia with the whole mateship thing, and the longer period of time you've spent with someone, and particularly when they know so much about you and, things that could be quite sensitive for that matter, you're less inclined to want to, have a divorce no matter how amicable, because of, blowback and then it's like, well, I'm now going to be on my own. Who's going to be my friend? Who's going to want me? There's all these kind of thoughts that go into your head. But I find that when I was able to, do that and make adjustments, and look, some of these people are really nice people. It's just a matter of the realization of spending that much time with them was really not productive, and it was a matter of just kind of curbing it. But I mean, what do you think about that? Is that a discussion you have with bands, and ever ask them to explore that and that part of their lives?
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because I'm sure you've heard of the saying, you are the combination of the 5 people that you spend the most time with.
Yeah, Jim Rohn, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard, but it's kind of true. I haven't actually had that discussion with bands, although I've certainly had discussions with friends about it. And it's not like you have to all of a sudden ditch all your old friends, but just sort of making a conscious effort to hang out with people who kind of lift you up instead of dragging you down. I think naturally, you're going to gravitate to positive people anyway, but yeah, if you're hanging around with people that are pessimistic and have more traditional views in terms of, you go to school and then you have a family and then you work and then you die, like those sorts of things, rather than kind of breaking the mold, which obviously musicians are. We are rule breakers,
Totally.
like any entrepreneurs. Yeah. Then yeah, just I suppose it can be a lonely road, as I was saying before, but it just comes with, I think, self-awareness is a good place to start, and just monitoring how your energy shifts when you hang around with certain people.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. I found in my dealing with the kids I mentor. They even the ones that successfully manage to make a little bit of an adjustment, there's usually this blowback, and then of course they feel bad, and so they just sort of they say, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say, and they get stuck in this loop because again, and I think this comes back, the big theme in that article is that the fear we have of what people think about us and what people are going to say, that the whole perception, and it's a story that we tell ourselves, but because we so want to connect, we so want to belong, we so want to be part of the gang, and when we do things
Yes.
that are actually going to be for our betterment, but it means that the dynamics is going to change with some of these people. I mean, even with things like success, tall poppy syndrome is so big in this country. Which we always love the underdog, but when they get to a certain point, we want to chop them down. But even in that situation, when people go through a shift and a change, and invariably their life will change because we're more successful now. So now we're touring a bit more, which means we're not around as much, which means we can't hang out as much, and things like that, for example. And then people, of course, go, well, hang on a minute, I'm your friend, what the fuck? And tensions can arise, and it's nobody's fault. But again, it's that whole thing of like, oh shit, I don't want to upset this person. I don't want to make sure I say the right thing. We're so you said it's a lonely road, but we don't like to be lonely, and people are afraid to be out in front and be alone for a while, and kind of not have the cheer squad around them. And yeah. Anyway, that's just one thing that has been a fascination of mine. I think I understand why it's there, but it is a big job to help turn things around. And like I said, self-awareness is a big one. That's a massive, massive one.
Yeah. And I think remembering that not everyone that you meet in your life is going to be there your entire life. So certain people are meant to be there for a couple of years. Certain people are meant to be there. Some people will be there for your whole life. But people's priorities change. It's like when, someone decides to have a family, their priorities are slightly different to someone who's not at that stage yet, or someone that's really career minded, or anything else like that. So, and that's okay. Like, as long as you're not hanging around with people that are toxic or that are making you feel like you can't do something, because at the end of the day, true friends and people that are truly supportive will want you to succeed, even if they don't understand it. So yeah, just remembering that not everyone's meant to be there for a lifetime, and kind of, sometimes it's a bit sad, but at the same time, then, you leave room for new people to come into your life who are going to make your life amazing. So just remembering that as well.
So, how did you get into this whole mindset trip? Have you been? I mean, how did you venture into personal development, and what got you started there, and with your interest in all that?
Oh my gosh, I think it's something that I've always been interested in. I can't remember if I was watching an episode of Oprah, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it was when that whole secret phenomenon was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and there was an interview with Rhonda Byrne. Oprah was interviewing her and talking about The Secret, and it just really clicked, because I think subconsciously, I've always kind of liked the idea that if you just decide that something's going to happen, or you just decide that this is the person that you're going to be, then that's who you are. Like, it's, you tell people how to treat you. In that sense, people, all of a sudden, if you start acting confident or start, I don't know, a lot of girls in the industry used to come to me and say, oh, no one takes me seriously because I'm a girl. But I've never had that issue personally, because I've always, I don't know, like, I always just took myself seriously, even though, there's inequality and whatnot. But you teach people how to treat you. So The Secret really resonated. And I think I was 15 or 14 or something at the time when
Wow.
that was all happening. And it kind of, over the years, it's something that I have forgotten about for periods of time as well. I've really kind of just gotten caught up with everyday life and not done any personal development or, those sorts of things. But I jumped back on the train a couple of years ago, and I don't know, I think if I didn't do music, I'd probably do psychology, because I find it just all fascinating. So I don't know, it's just this whole like ride that I've been on, and I'm naturally just interested in that sort of thing,
No,
I guess.
I think it's great. I just, the first time I heard about anything of that nature was, I think it was in 1988, with Tony Robbins, a friend of mine, this producer that I was sharing an apartment with in Toronto. He put me onto it, and that was my first introduction. I sort of dipped in and dipped out, and but I think for me, a lot of that world was, it was interesting, but I saw a lot of it was really around, coupled around, a corporate thing and wealth creation and things like that. And I think it's only been in recent times that we've seen more and more people talking more about mindset and not veering down too much on the whole material side of things. Just, how do I find fulfillment, not just achievement, because I know a lot of, artists, musicians who have achieved a hell of a lot, and yet a lot of them still, for whatever reason, not happy because it's not enough. We need another gold record, or we need a bigger tour, or there's always going to be something that they want. And while you're still chasing, again, and this is why I think you talked about, again, it's got to be something outside of you. And it's this thing that I tell people that my mentor, Peter Sage, told me, and I'll just briefly, break it down very briefly, but he talked about the curse of the white rabbit, which is the white rabbit's a metaphor for money, fame, fortune, acceptance, love, what have you. And he said that, on the greyhound track, the greyhounds never actually catch the rabbit, and it's set up that way deliberately. But the greyhounds never get pissed off at that. They keep coming back to race every week. And the reason why is not because it's about the rabbit, it's about running. It's about a process. They're born to run. So musicians are born to create. So the making it, quote unquote, is not, yes, there is something to be said about achieving notoriety, exposure. These things are great indicators and metrics that set you apart. But ultimately, it's not what it's about. It's, the making it, in my view, is the fact that you got off your ass, you're up there and you're doing it, whether you're part-timing, doing it as a sideline while you're trying to do it full-time. Just so long as you are in the process of doing it and enjoying the process, that's the main thing. And cliche as it sounds, I think once you let go of the attachment to success in terms of the external stuff, and it's more the feeling you get, then, and that's where, the muse kicks in and the greatest art it gets created. And that's where then more than likely you'll become successful in the older kind of paradigm.
Yeah. And I love what you said about enjoying the process, because I don't think the process ever ends. Once we achieve one milestone, then we kind of linger there very shortly, and then boom, we're on to the next goal. That's just how, we're constantly designed to be, evolving and growing, or else if we're not, then that's when we become unhappy. So even, for local bands, just enjoying, of course, playing live is amazing, but I think just taking the time to look back on the journey as well and seeing how far you've come, because it's so easy to look forward and say, oh, I don't have this, I haven't played a festival yet, or I haven't been signed to a record label yet. But when you're at the point where you're headlining and, filling up rooms, and you've released amazing music, and you're just, being able to hang out and create with, a couple of other amazing people if you're in a band, then just enjoying that. If you're happy with whatever you have now, then you'll always be happy. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I
The
agree.
process never ends.
I agree. I often tell people, just be grateful for what you have now, because whatever you do have right now on this day in this moment, once upon a time was just a wish for you, and so now you've got these things, and yes, I understand the whole thing of like, I want to do better, I want to improve, I want to move to the next level, but I think the key thing is just to, again, the self-awareness thing of reminding yourself that while these things are good to go for and there's nothing wrong with achieving and wanting to do all that, so long as you don't identify your self-worth along that, if you do, it's like that rabbit. You'll never catch it. It's just, you're pissing in the wind.
I mean, whether you have like 100,000 followers on Facebook, or whether you have a number one single, or it, like, you're still the same person at the end of the day. Like, those numbers don't actually matter to you as a person, your actual quality of a person. Like, you're still the same giving person, a good person. Like, those numbers are just, they can be markers to, goals and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you're still you. And whether if you're an asshole when you're poor, you're going to be an asshole when you're rich. If you're a giving person when you're poor, you're going to be a giving person when you're rich. Nothing changes. But one thing I do like to do myself, and what I've recommended to a couple of friends and clients as well, actually, is doing a celebration list. So it's kind of like a to-do list, but the opposite. So at the end of the day, writing down everything that you've actually achieved. And I found this is helpful for me because, especially with the business, eventually, I'm just doing this part-time now. And of course I want to take it full-time, and I'm kind of like, hurry up, I just want to do this full-time. But, I've forgotten how, all those amazing key opportunities that I've gotten, such as talking to yourself, all these, I'll write that on my on my celebration list. Like, we have to celebrate all these like little things and little opportunities that we get, because they're not little, they're big, because, as a cumulative thing, that's what's moving us forward. And we need to just be proud of what we've done instead of bypassing what we've done and constantly looking to the future.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, what sort of things you like to do outside of music and your mentoring and your social media strategizing? You got time to juggle anything else to bring? I don't want to call it balance, because I don't believe in work-life balance. I think that's a furphy. But
me too.
just to kind of make life a little more interesting, or things that help to take you away a little bit from music, so that you can come back feeling a little more refreshed to do what you do.
Yeah. So
after a while, you get pretty stale.
Yeah. I like to, firstly, every now and then I'll do a complete social media detox where I'll literally switch off of everything for 24 hours. And a lot of the times I have to tell like my bandmates, because they'll be like, Monica, you haven't been on Instagram, and like, you haven't posted on Instagram today, or Instagram stories. What's wrong? Are you okay? And I've learned I have to tell them in advance, or else they think that something's wrong.
Yeah.
So switching off from social media, I love to do that and just sort of get back into nature, walk by the beach, that sort of thing. I love like just the Melbourne lifestyle. I've been here for 2 years now, and one of my favorite things to do is just to go explore like the markets and the artist markets in Rose Street, or just like the local farmers markets, and just kind of like get out into the fresh air and do something like wholesome.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think it's important that particularly musicians, or as an engineer, it's a very sedentary lifestyle, and I think it's important that just getting outside, sunshine, fresh air, bare feet on the ground, getting some voltage from the earth, interacting with different people, just anything at all that takes you away from that environment. And especially for those of us who spend a lot of our time indoors and seated, it's really important to do that. But I think some extended breaks as well. I found that when I, and of course, usually I usually wait until, of course, I'm getting close to burnout. So, I got to be able to practice what I preach too, although I'm getting better at it. But when I find myself in that space, I need to do, get away, or do a bit of, exercise, or just something, anything that is non-music related, and also to as much as I love music and the art form and all this stuff, it's good to get it out in amongst just other people that come from different walks of life that have nothing to do with music as a way of learning and about other people and just getting new data into your head,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so easy to spend days on end indoors, especially when you work for yourself. Like, I can easily spend a whole weekend from Friday night till Monday morning, not even leaving my house because there's always something that you can do. So, and it can be really, really hard to, practice what you preach and kind of pull yourself away. But getting that fresh air is and that grounding is so important, but it can be difficult. And also, like, I know for a lot of people, they actually can't switch off from social media because, it is an addiction. And even when I do have those days where I switch off for a day or two, I don't know if I could do 2 full days. That might be my next assignment. But it is kind of like automatic to continue to reach for your phone and to almost feel like, I know you're not getting that dopamine hit that a notification would give. So, and I don't know, that becomes addictive as well, because once you can get past that initial hard part of like not reaching for your phone, then you kind of like, I never want to go on social media. I just want to go live in the middle of Australia in a hut somewhere and just live off the land and be a hippie. I think that's what I would do if I wasn't so entrenched in technology for work.
Yeah, it's a digital dopamine. It's a real thing. It really is. Apparently, it gives the same kind of hit as if you're, doing drugs or, any other kind of addiction. It's a similar kind of thing. And I think because we're so addicted to certainty and knowing what's coming up, and we just want things to be secure and safe. And I think social media for a lot of people, it's like, what's happening, what's up, and by not knowing and feeling like out of the loop, there's this sense of like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I need to know. And so, people will jump in and want to get a hit, so to speak. Tell me, amongst your clients, how, mental health, as you know, in the industry, it's rampant. It runs at a much higher, more people in our industry are affected by mental health and the already high, percentages out in the mainstream. How do you see, how much mental health issues do you find comes up? Is that the sort of thing you deal with in consulting, or do you see much of that amongst the clients that you deal with? And how do you manage your own mental health?
Yeah. It's so common. So common. I have personally struggled with mental health. Pretty much majority of the other musicians that I know have struggled with their mental health. It's absolutely rampant. Like, I think a lot of it has to do with comparison and social media. And that's, the first thing I would recommend is just what we were saying before, is just to detox from social media. And it is really hard. And we can almost feel like we can't do it, but you can do it. You just got to push through that hump. I think comparison is definitely the leading cause of not feeling worthy or imposter syndrome. So for anyone that's struggling, or they feel like, once upon a time they had all these amazing dreams with music, which a lot of the musicians that I speak to, they were so passionate once upon a time, and they just feel like they're grinding and burning out, and their career hasn't even begun. Let's be real. Like, they're just playing the local scene. They haven't been signed. And once you're signed, that's often thought of as the pinnacle or the end goal for a lot of local bands, but that's actually the beginning. So that can be very, very overwhelming. I don't think there's enough support personally out there for musicians suffering from mental health issues. I know there's Support Act, and we have like Beyond Blue and a couple of other resources. But
Entertainment Assist, I think, are another mob that do that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it comes down to more the discussion. Like a lot of things, there are people that like the idea of to be open and to be supportive and to have the dialogue and to take away the stigma. But I still think and again, this is only speaking amongst some of the people I mentor, the reluctance to want to share their story, and some of them have amazing stories, for others to hear and see, to inspire them, because they've actually done some amazing things despite their challenges. And yet there still seems to be a little bit of a thing about, but what if so-and-so sees it, and it may possibly affect what I say. Or as, I had a friend of mine who wrote a post about it, and he was saying how much, he was extremely transparent, very courageous to put, just to put his heart on the line and be really raw and vulnerable. And he cop shit from some of his friends. They're saying, dude, come on, calm the fuck down. Just
seriously.
Yeah. And of course that kind of made them cringe. And I'm sure their intention was, look, Ben, you might be harming yourself, or you may be going a bit over the top. But he knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, he's a very self-aware dude. But again, I still think that there is this thing of, we love the idea of it, but not for me, or not as much for me. And I think until we keep having that discussion, and not just to wait until some fucking rock star dies from suicide, and that's when everyone will come out and, talk about stuff. And
safe.
Because everyone's on the bandwagon, right? And so no one's, again, this whole thing of like, I don't want to stand out, I'm going to worry what people think about me. So, I think it's definitely getting better from what it was. I believe it'll be just a slower, longer burn. And again, I think as more and more people start coming on board and talking more about their experiences, and I think it's not just the talking about it, but it's also, there's something, all right, talking about it is great, but also, well, what do we do? Or what about sharing the things that I've done to help me? So, whenever I've written a blog about it, I'll just, point form, these are things that have helped me. Or, and I copped a bit of flack for this, but I shared a view about, I think the way I see mental health these days, and by the way, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist. I have dick qualification to talk about it from an academic medical viewpoint. But from my own experience, I found that once I learned to reframe that, while there may be some chemical imbalance going on neurologically, for the most part, I think that depression and anxiety really are things that we have based around the story we tell ourselves. And with depressives, it's about the past, regrets of the past, things that they wish they hadn't said, done, things that have happened because of it, and so they just keep flogging themselves. And for people with anxiety like myself, who are classic overthinkers, it's about the future. What if this, and what's going to happen, and all this kind of stuff. Again, the addiction to certainty. And I copped a bit of shit over that because they thought it was an overly simplistic thing. But I know what helped me with my anxiety greatly was once I started to reframe my story and started to, still work in progress, giving up or slowly letting go of the need for certainty in life. That it's okay not to know what's around the corner. Things will work out. Don't know why, don't know how, but they kind of do. And the more I can hold on to that as a new part of the story, less prone to anxiety.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think you're so right in the sense that a lot of people want to be supportive and on the outside, well, not even on the outside, they are supportive, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, I mean, to be completely open and honest, I don't know. Even though I know that it's such a big issue, I can't believe that I still haven't written a blog post or done a piece of content about, mental health, because, I haven't really communicated this a lot, but I've definitely suffered from depression and anxiety pretty much my whole entire life. But at the same time, I have always wanted to be a beacon of positivity and a beacon of inspiration for other people. I don't know if that sounds like kind of cocky, but
No,
I'm just a naturally optimistic and positive person. And I find it's my duty to lift other people up. And so the last thing I want to do is go on this rant about, something that I'm going through. I think it's more powerful in terms of when you are, sharing online in terms of trying to be a leader in your industry, to share the breakthrough as opposed to the breakdown. But yeah, in saying that, it's not something that I've spoken about a lot. And I don't know. It's crazy because I still feel, I don't know. I would have to, it's something that I have to think about. Like, it's definitely not something I'm confident in sharing, even though I know that so many people will be able to relate to it. I've certainly wrote articles about musician burnout and other aspects, but telling my story, I don't know, maybe I think that no one will really care. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Well, first of all, I think there's no rush for you to do it, and I think already you are putting out a lot of good content, and it's positive and it's useful, and it's great to see someone like you. As I said, I know there's a lot of people on ground level who mentor and help, but people who actually will go out there, in the socials and share that information. I think you're doing a great job already with what you're doing, and I don't think and I don't think that you have to be. I don't think I'm a poster boy for mental health either, and it's not necessarily something I write about all the time. It's just one of those things I do. Again, it's like when we go back to the start of the podcast, we talk about I will put out there things that I feel in the moment come to me, or I might do a video in the worldwide mastering group, for example, from 2 mentees come that week. Oh shit, that's going to be the theme, and away I go, and I do it, and I do it there and then. I don't think about what's the best time for fucking Instagram, or how long it should be, or whether it should be landscape, or I don't give a fuck. It's like boom, I just put it out there, and I think. And I think, again, I know you haven't asked me, but I'll just offer you something to consider, and that is, with respect to your stuff. I put more and more stuff out there because I'm getting to the age I'm finally becoming more and more okay with, not that I don't give a fuck, but less concerned about what people are thinking, knowing that there are people out there that will resonate with it, and it does, and they don't have to like it or share it or anything. You just know that as there's a lot of people that lurk just there, and they're watching, and that could be. And again, this comes to why you're not doing it because as you are. You're not doing it because you want validation or recognition, or you want people to put you on a pedestal. You feel you've got something worthwhile that is not being, that there's a gap somewhere, and you feel it's a worthwhile thing, and you're helping people directly, indirectly, and you're rewarded by that. So I wouldn't worry too much about whether you've written or how much you've written about it. I think you can touch on the subject. Look, I think the most important thing is that whatever you put out there is positive. It comes from the right place. It's real. It's from your heart, and it's done with no expectation, and it's done purely because it's again, without wanting to sound corny, it's done out of service for others and for your community, and hopefully more people like yourself will go online and to share their experiences and share content and information, and hopefully, the sort of things that you talk about are really important. There's lots of great stuff with tutorials and how do I work on my stage presence, or lighting, or all those things that are important. But I think more important is the underlying things of mindset, because no matter how, as you said before, lots of talented musicians, lots of skilled people, but because they don't feel they're worthy of it, or their mindset isn't quite there, they won't ever reach their full potential.
Yeah, and it's so important to remember for bands as well that you actually never know who's watching. So the amount of times that I've put out a post and it seemingly hasn't done so well in terms of the numbers, then I'll get a DM, a really, really long DM from someone saying, oh, I've been, kind of reading your posts for a while, and I just wanted to reach out and say this particular one, the one that got low engagement from my perspective, really, really impacted me, and it's changed my mind about something, or it's really, really resonated. So, and the same goes for bands as well. I attended, this is kind of a little bit off mindset, but I think it all plays sort of in together in terms of you never know who's watching. I went to Big Sound in 2017 with my boss Carl from Heavy Magazine, and we went to watch a band on the first night before the festival had even started. And there was myself, there was my, the owner of a really successful publication, which was my boss. There was a guy, a really successful band manager. There was a booking agent, and we were all kind of sitting, we were pretty much the only ones at the gig. and we were watching this band, and from the band's perspective, it may have looked like there was 5 people in the audience, but like, holy shit, what an incredible lineup to play in front of.
Yeah, no shit.
And
Absolutely.
I just thought, yeah, how many times, have bands played a show and they're kind of leave a bit deflated afterwards because they think they haven't done well because there hasn't been many people in the crowd, but you never know, what those people can do for your band, or how you may even, just even from an audience perspective, how you may impact their lives by seeing you be your truest, fullest self on stage is really, very, really very inspiring. Or there may be a lyric that stands out, or you may have just improved their night by being like hella entertaining. Like, you never know who's watching, and you never know the impact that you're making on other people. So as long as you've got that bigger picture in mind and you know why you're doing it, then the numbers really don't matter on or offline.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, Monica, I'm going to wind up the podcast. So thank you so much for availing yourself. And we took a few attempts that we got there, but it was just delightful to speak with you. And again, just so good to see someone online who is going out there and doing stuff to help musicians and artists, in particular when it comes around to some of that mindset stuff in the way that you do. And hopefully in the future, you and I will be able to do something, a workshop or something one of these days. I think it'd be a lot of fun to do.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. So
thank you so much. I haven't really had an opportunity so far to talk so in depth about mindset. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, indeed. Mine was too. Okay. Thank you so much, Monica. And good luck with and where can people find you on the socials in case they want to hit you up, and we'll put the links down, below in the YouTube channel. So where can they hit you up if they want to have a chat to you about stuff to see how you can take care of them?
Yeah. So I have a Facebook group called Music Marketing and Mindset for heavy bands and musicians. We have discussions pretty much every single week, if not every day, about all things strategy, and mindset works its way in there quite a lot of the time as well. So definitely come and join the community there. There's a lot of amazing, savvy musicians part of the group. It's really, really cool. And Instagram at Monica Strut. I'm pretty much Monica Strut everywhere: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So yeah, come add me. I love to have good chats in the DMs. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks again, Monica. I really appreciate your time. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. And that is it. That is the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for watching and listening in. So I've got some really good guests lined up. I can't talk too much about it until I prefer to talk about it when I've actually got it, recorded in the can. But thank you for watching and listening. And as I always say, please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. We'll see you next time. All right. See ya.